Hey everyone, it's the Diplomat, and we are on part 31 of the Chris Watts Discovery Read-Through. We will begin here on page 665, and in this part we will go through 4 different interviews. The first with Leonard, Shanann's ex-husband, Anne, their realtor, as well as interviews with both Frank Rusek and Frankie Rusek, Shanann's father and Shanann's brother. Okay, on page 665 we have a CBI report. This is an interview with Leonard, who is the ex-husband of Shanann, and this occurred on August 15th and was done by Agent Stacy Galbraith. It was determined that Shanann Watts was previously married to Leonard, an attorney in North Carolina. Action taken. I spoke with Leonard by phone on August 15th at 2:27 p.m. He had heard about the case in which Shanann and her children were missing. Leonard reported that he and Shanann married in 2002-2003 and divorced in 2007-2008 in South Carolina. They had no children from their marriage together and have not communicated in over 10 years, he estimated. Leonard reported that he and Shanann took out life insurance policies when they were married around 2004-2005 through USAA. They were large policies, $250K or $500K. After the divorce, Leonard kept his but changed it to $100K and changed the beneficiary. He assumed that Shanann kept her policy and would have changed the beneficiary. Leonard denied that he currently had any policies on her life. Leonard does not believe that the divorce decree addressed the life insurance policies. Leonard's current wife dabbled in Thrive, which was the same employment as Shanann Watts. Leonard had heard that Shanann was really involved in Thrive. Leonard actually did not know Shanann's last name until a few days ago. He learned of this case from social media and news. He had already been contacted by NBC News. Leonard agreed to share my contact information with his wife for her to call if she knew anything about Shanann, possibly through Thrive. I asked Leonard about his relationship with Shanann. When their marriage was not going so well, Shanann poured herself into work, worked a lot, and stopped coming home at night. Leonard was unable to get details from her. Shanann would stay gone, but he was never concerned that something happened to her. Leonard knew that Shanann first worked with cell phones when he met her. She then went to work in Charlotte, North Carolina for a Middle Eastern guy that owned a tire and wheel business called Dirty South. She was the store manager. Leonard had heard that Shanann left her cell phone at home. He said that she used it constantly when he knew her, and she was well attached to it. Leonard knew nothing of Shanann's current husband other than what he saw on the news. Leonard said that people liked Shanann. She was a compelling personality. Shanann was in high school when Leonard first met her. She got along well with people. I asked about Shanann's skills in conflict resolution. Leonard said that he was very interested in marriage counseling, and they went to a couple sessions, but it was virtually impossible to engage Shanann in conversation. Once she was done, she cut herself off from him. At home, they would be in different rooms, and she was always too busy for what Leonard had going on. She was not confrontational and more withdrew. I thanked Leonard for his time. Interview concluded at 2:48 p.m. Okay, the next page on 669 is an interview with the Realtor Ann Meadows, August 15th. This is at 7:54 p.m., also by Stacy Galbraith. Cassie, close friend of Shanann Watts, provided that Shanann and Chris used Anne, a real estate agent, to purchase their current house. It was learned that Chris Watts contacted Anne on August 13th about selling the house. Action taken. Agent Galbraith contacted Anne by phone on August 15th at 7:54 p.m. Anne told me that Shanann Watts sent her a message on Facebook Messenger on August 10th to tell her that she and Chris were thinking about moving. She said that she would be out of town and back in town on Sunday night. She wanted to get together with Anne to discuss after she returned. Shanann asked for the best sites to be looking for homes on, and Anne sent her to Colorado and sent Shanann a mobile app to search with. Anne then sent Shanann a follow-up message suggesting they get pre-approved for a loan to begin with. Shanann did not reply, and Anne expected that she would once she returned to town. On Monday, August 13th at 8:28 a.m., Ann received a 3-minute phone call from Chris Watts. Ann was surprised and actually taken aback when Chris called, as it was Shanann that Ann usually talked with about real estate. Ann was their agent when they bought the house they were living in. She only talked with Chris maybe twice during the transaction. Chris asked Ann if Shanann had called her yet. She told Chris that she sent her a message in Messenger and that Ann suggested that he and Chris get pre-approved for a loan. Chris told Ann that no one knew yet, but he and Shanann were getting divorced after not getting along for over a year. Ann was shocked and told Chris that she was sorry. He told Ann that not even his family knows. As the day, August 13th, progressed, Ann sent text messages to Chris and Shanann about the house. Shanann was usually vocal on issues, and Shanann was not weighing in on the group texts. Ann justified that perhaps the divorce situation had Shanann not participating in the topic of the text. Ann discussed comps in the neighborhood and updates to the home by text in an effort to estimate value. Ann saw on Facebook that Shanann was missing and realized that Shanann had not weighed in all day when she was texting Chris. Ann reached out to Chris and stated that she realized Shanann was missing and asked if he was okay. He assured Ann that he had reported to police and she could send prayers. Ann knew Chris and Shanann before they bought the house they live in. They were both loving to each other and seemed really in love. Shanann was lovely, sweet, and ambitious. Chris was quiet and a good father. Ann knew nothing about the Watts' finances. Ann believed that Shanann was successful with Thrive, and she worked hard. I thanked Ann for her time. Ann forwarded screenshots of her communication with Chris and Shanann Watts. Review of the screenshots forwarded to me by Ann. This is Chris Watts calling her, the 3-minute phone call. So it's a screenshot of his contact information. And then it also says regarding the Facebook messages between Shanann and Ann. Shanann reaches out to Ann to tell her that she and Chris would like to talk with her about selling the house. She told Ann that she was out of town until late Sunday. Ann asked Shanann where they wanted to move. Shanann told her he, Chris, was talking about Brighton or Fort Lupton, stating they cannot move too far south due to his job. Shanann said they had just talked about it last night. She then said they thought about it off or on, but the construction behind them was holding them back. They now have a lot of it done. Before Shanann paints the baby's room and more, she wanted to see where they are at and their options. Ann suggested Brighton and Erie. Shanann said they do not want to downsize for the same price they are paying, though. On Friday, 10:25 a.m., Shanann asked Ann about Realtor.com or Zillow. Ann suggested ReColorado.com as the best to look, and she said she would send her a phone app. On Saturday, 10:05 a.m., Ann messaged to suggest Shanann talk to one of Ann's lenders. Shanann did not reply. Then we have the actual text messages between Shanann and Ann that I will read, starting with Shanann. Hey love, how are you doing? Chris and I would like to talk to you about possibly selling the house. I'm out of town till late Sunday. From Ann. All right, where do you want to move? Shanann. He's talking Brighton, possibly Fort Lupton. We can't move too far south because of his job. Thinking, that area. We just talked about it last night. You move fast. We have thought about it off and on, but the construction behind us was holding us back. They have a lot of it done. And then a emoji tongue sticking out face. But before I paint baby's room and more, I think it's better to see where we are at and options. My suggestion would be not to move too far out. The further you go, the more vulnerable your money is. Brighton may be best, if both worlds. Erie. So Brighton is good, from Shanann. We don't want to downsize for same price we are paying, though, from Ann. I think it might be a better option than Fort Lupton. Keep in mind that when the market turns, the outer lying areas get hit first. Brighton might be your best bet. Shanann. Okay, sounds good. Realtor.com best to look, what's there? Or Zillow? ReColorado.com is the best spot. I will also send you a phone app. Thank you, from Shanann. And from Ann, anytime. I was also thinking, maybe we should have you talk to one of my lenders. What do you think? Okay, next page, text between Ann and Chris. Monday, 12:27 p.m., Ann texted Chris to tell him she was working on his market analysis and asked about upgrades to the house. Chris replied that the basement is still unfinished and there are no upgrades. Anna asked about a comparable model in their neighborhood, and Chris agrees to drive by it when he gets home. Ann says that it is under contract and she will call the realtor to see what is sold for to get a number. Ann asked, "Is Shanann okay? She hasn't weighed in all day." Chris replied, "She hasn't been around all day. It's very odd." Ann replied that it is really weird and asked if he was worried. She asked if Chris has checked with Shanann's friends or called to report her missing. Chris told Ann that he has done it all and the police are handling it now. Monday, 5:47 p.m., Chris thanked Ann. She asked if he drove by the comparable house. He said that he just did, and that is the exact model. Ann was waiting to hear back from the agent, and then they could set a time to meet. So I'm not going to go back through Chris's text with Ann. We have covered that before. Those are all there on 673 and 670. On 674. So we will continue on to page 676. 676 is missing. We're going to head on to 677, which is an interview with Frank Rusek. Action taken. On August 21st, I, Matthew Saylor, and Agent Tracy Schwartzbauer responded to the Doubletree Hotel located in Greeley, Colorado, to interview Frank Rusek, father of Shanann Watts. The interview was conducted in his hotel room and began at approximately 2:36 p.m. The interview was audio recorded, and a copy of the recording is attached to this report. The following is a synopsis of the interview. For additional details, refer to the audio recording. It should be noted that prior to the interview, when I met with him in the lobby of the hotel, Frank advised me of a Facebook friend request he received from someone claiming to be Chris Watts, Shanann's husband, and this is referenced at the beginning of the interview. It was later determined that the account that the friend request came from was a fraudulent account, not belonging to Chris Watts. Frank said Chris Watts was a great father to his children, Bella and Celeste. He said he couldn't have asked for anything better for his grandchildren, and that Chris would play with them, bathe them, and take care of them. Frank said that he felt the same way about Chris as a husband to Shanann, and that he never saw any problems between them. Frank said that he recently watched the girls while Shanann and Chris went on a vacation she received through Thrive, the company she worked for. Frank said he noticed Chris was getting a little more stern with them, but didn't think much about it. Frank said that he never knew Chris to hit the girls. Frank said that Chris had lost a lot of weight using Thrive products, but said Chris had always taken care of himself physically. Frank said that Shanann brought the girls out to North Carolina for 6 weeks and were bouncing back and forth between his house and Chris's parents' house. Frank said that Celeste was very allergic to nuts, and Shanann had told them and Chris's parents to put away anything with nuts. Frank said they scoured their house for anything containing nuts. Frank said that Shanann took the girls to Chris's parents' house a couple of times, but that she didn't get along with Chris's mom. Frank said that they felt that Shanann had taken their son away from them and didn't go to their engagement party, wedding, or other events. Frank said that one time when Shanann took the girls over to Chris's parents' house, possibly during the second week of her vacation, Shanann called him and said to get away from Chris's parents. Frank said that there were nuts all over the house and some kids were eating ice cream with nuts. Shanann and Chris's mother had words, and the mother told her it was a quote-unquote training lesson. Shanann was angry and told Chris about it, who spoke with his mother. Chris's mother told him the same thing, so Shanann never went back to Chris's parents' house. Frank said that Shanann and Chris would FaceTime call each other just about every day so Chris could see the girls. Frank said that a couple of times he overheard Shanann say something to Chris about him not paying attention, like he was in another world. Frank said that when Chris came out to North Carolina, he was the same as he always was, as far as his demeanor. Frank said that Chris has always been quiet and doesn't show emotion. Frank said that everything seemed normal, and neither Shanann nor Chris ever gave any indication of marital problems. Frank said that when they heard that Chris was going to a baseball game on Saturday, August 11th, He thought it was strange, as he never left the girls with someone else when Shanann isn't there. She was in Arizona for a conference. Frank said Shanann checked her finances on the phone and found out that Chris had spent over $60 on dinner that Saturday night and asked him about it. Chris told her that he had salmon and a couple of beers, but Shanann thought that was a lot of money for salmon and a couple of beers. Frank said that he was told this by one of Shanann's friends, not from Shanann. Frank said that he spoke to Chris on Sunday night, August 12th, on FaceTime. Frank said that Bella was eating cold pizza and some candy. Frank said that was the last time he spoke with any of them. Frank said he hadn't talked to Shanann recently because he usually leaves her alone when she is out of town. When asked how he found out that Shanann and the girls are missing, Frank said that his wife, Sandra, tried to get a hold of Shanann and couldn't. Frank said that sometimes his wife can be pushy with Shanann and Shanann will not respond to her, so Sandra will ask him to contact Shanann for her, but she never did that day. Frank said that his wife called Chris and told him that Shanann wasn't answering her and he should call the hospitals. Frank said that when she was in North Carolina, Shanann was very excited about taking Bella to kindergarten, but she didn't show up at school. Frank said that Shanann was a stickler when it came to being on time to everything. Frank said that Chris told Sandra that he had texted Shanann a few times and that she was, in quotes, in one of her moods, that they had a small fight and Shanann was going to a friend's house. Frank said that Sandra received a phone call from Shanann's friend, Nicole, saying the police were at Shanann's house because she was missing. Nicole said they couldn't get into the house because of the security latch that Frank had installed on the front door. Frank said he called Chris several times, asking where he was at, and Chris told him that he was hurrying home. Frank said that Nate, Chris's neighbor, told him that he had video of Chris backing his truck into the driveway. Frank said that Chris's truck was never in the driveway because Shanann didn't want it leaking oil, and that he lived in the house with Chris and Shanann for over a year and never saw the truck in the driveway. Frank said that Nate also told him that while Shanann was gone, Chris took her SUV out of the garage and parked it on the street. Frank said that both of those pieces of information were very concerning to him, as they were vastly different from the norm. Frank said that Sandra was on the phone with Nicole when they got into the house with the police, and they heard that Shanann's cell phone and purse were still in the house. He knew something was wrong. Frank said that the police said that it was possible that Shanann had left, but he said he knew that wasn't possible because Shanann never went anywhere without her phone, that she had it 24 hours a day. Frank said that he didn't believe that Shanann would hurt the girls as Chris had claimed. He said that the girls were her life, and taking care of kids was her life. Frank said he didn't know anything about Shanann and Chris's financials, as they never discussed it with him. Frank said that they never asked him to lend them money. Frank said Shanann never told him anything about her and Chris not getting along. Frank said that Chris and Shanann met through a mutual friend in North Carolina. He said that Shanann had migraines and fibromyalgia, and one time when she first met Chris, she told him that her head was hurting and she fell asleep on Chris's lap, and he let her stay there for hours and didn't move while he rubbed her head. Frank said that Chris and Shanann married in North Carolina and then moved to Colorado because the weather was better for Shanann's medical conditions. Frank said that Chris quickly found a job in Colorado because he was a master mechanic and moved out before Shanann did. Shanann stayed behind because she had to sell a house she owned in North Carolina. Frank said they moved to Colorado about 4 to 5 years ago. Frank said that Chris deleted his Facebook page about a week and a half ago when he talked to him on the phone on Monday, August 13th. Frank said Chris was not very active on Facebook and wasn't aware of any other social media he used. Frank said that Shanann called and told them when she had become pregnant. Frank said that they believed Chris and Shanann were trying to have another baby, but that they were concerned for Shanann's health. Frank said that every time she became pregnant, she had an elaborate way of telling Chris and video recorded it. Frank said that they kept asking what the sex of the baby was, and Shanann kept telling them she didn't know. Frank said that Chris told them that the doctor wrote the sex down and sealed it in an envelope, and he never got to see that. Frank said that they were trying to have a boy, that Chris wanted a boy. Frank said the last time he spoke with Shanann was before she left for Arizona. Frank said that he normally would talk with her every day because he would FaceTime with the girls. Frank said that if Shanann was gone, he'd still FaceTime with the girls through Chris. Frank said that he spoke with the girls on Sunday, August 12th. Frank said he spoke with Chris and Bella said something about her mommy coming home, and he told her not until late. Frank said that the girls were eating dinner, so he believed it was approximately 7 p.m. his time in North Carolina. Frank said that the kids usually eat around 5 p.m., and Shanann was very strict on their schedule. Frank said everything seemed normal while on FaceTime. Frank said when he heard that Shanann was missing and her phone was in the house, he immediately knew something was wrong. Frank said that he installed the security latch on the front door and that if Shanann came home late, she probably would have engaged it. He said that Shanann utilized the latch more often than Chris did. Frank said that Shanann doesn't open the garage door until everyone is in the car because the girls will run away. Frank said after he heard all of the circumstances, such as the phone and the EpiPen still in the house and the doors locked from the inside, he immediately suspected that Chris had done something. Frank said that wasn't like Shanann, and Chris was the only one to see her that day. Frank said he and Sandra lived with them for 15 or 16 months a couple of years ago. He said he was in Colorado for Christmas 2016 and possibly 2015, but was back in North Carolina for Christmas 2017. Frank said that when the girls would get punished for anything, they would always cry for him. He said Shanann set it up so that when he left here after watching them for the week that Shanann and Chris were gone, that she would fly back to North Carolina with him. She initially was going to stay for a couple of weeks, but ultimately ended up staying for 6 weeks. Frank said that when he had them in the airport, the girls ran away from him, and when he caught up to them, Bella was screaming at the top of her lungs. Frank said that when they went back to the house, the girls did the same thing to Chris. Frank said looking back, it is possible that Chris got tired of the girls crying for their mother instead of him, and he resented that. Frank said that Chris's father was very close with the girls and always commented on Shanann's posts of the girls on social media. Frank said that it is possible that Chris thought that if something happened to Shanann, the girls would go to her parents instead of his and didn't want that to happen. Frank said that the 6-week trip to North Carolina was the first time they had visited for that long. Shanann initially said she was coming out for a couple of weeks, then decided to stay longer because she was pregnant and wouldn't be able to keep flying. Frank said that he and his wife take their vacations to come to Colorado to watch Bella and Celeste while Chris and Shanann go on trips paid for by Thrive. Frank said he believes the time Shanann was in North Carolina gave Chris time to think about what he wanted to do, and that he doesn't believe this, the murder of Shanann and the girls, was a quote-unquote spur-of-the-moment thing. Frank said this is because Chris moved the car out of the garage, that he had a girlfriend, that he knew where to take the bodies, and that things don't, quote-unquote, add up. Frank said that Shanann got her Lexus through Thrive, who paid for the car. He said that Shanann told Chris to take an Uber to the airport when he went to North Carolina, and he took the Lexus instead. Frank said this angered Shanann because she was worried about hail. Frank said that Shanann was very protective of her car. Frank said that Shanann was a fighter and has very powerful legs. Frank said he believes that Shanann was sleeping when Chris killed her because if she had been awake, she would have fought Chris and he would have injuries. Frank said that Shanann had lupus, fibromyalgia, migraines, and about a year ago had neck surgery. Frank said that she had medical issues when she was a kid, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong. Frank said that she was finally tested for lupus while in North Carolina. Frank said that after moving to Colorado and starting using Thrive products, Shanann was able to stop taking her lupus medication. Frank said that he and his wife also use the products and that they work very well. Frank said he wasn't aware of any mental conditions suffered by Shanann. Frank said she might have had some issues with her pregnancies, and that is why they were so worried about her being pregnant again. Frank said she did not have postpartum depression. Frank said he wasn't aware of any medical issues that Chris had, besides possibly a hernia. Frank said he wasn't aware of any psychiatric issues Chris may have had, and didn't believe he ever went to a psychiatric doctor. Frank said that Celeste had several allergies, as well as a problem with her throat that went away. He said Bella had allergies when she was a baby, but no other medical issues. Frank said that he spoke with Chris every night on FaceTime. He said they called every night around dinner time to talk to the girls, and he didn't call to speak with just Chris. Frank said they called on FaceTime on Sunday, August 12th, on his wife's phone. Frank and Bella was eating cold pizza, and he didn't see Celeste but heard her. Frank said that he heard her talking about, quote-unquote, Mommy coming home. And Chris told her that she was coming home tonight, and when she woke up the next morning, her mom would be home. Frank says that Chris has a sister. He said that Chris's dad was very involved with the girls, and his mother was more hands-off. Frank said that all of Chris's family blocked them on Facebook after the fight over the nuts at Chris's parents' house. Frank said that Shanann and his son, Frankie, are his only children. Frank said that the keypad to the garage door did not work when he was living at the house and believes it was still broken. Frank said that it was not uncommon for there to be a blanket on the couch in the loft, and that it was usually a king-sized blue or burgundy blanket. Frank said that he is colorblind, so the colors may be off. He said it was not unusual for Shanann to sleep on the couch in the loft. Frank said that Shanann built the house they lived in North Carolina, and everything in that house was moved to the house in Colorado. Frank said that Shanann was a very hard worker. Frank said he had no further information. I left my contact information and advised him to contact me with any additional information. End of report. Attachments, audio recording of interview with Frank. Okay, on the next page, page 684, we now have the interview of Frankie, Shanann's brother, and this is also by Matthew Saylor, as well as Tracy Schwartzbauer. Action taken. On August 21st, I, Matthew Saylor, and Agent Tracy Schwartzbauer responded to the Doubletree Hotel to interview Frankie, brother of Shanann. The interview began at approximately 3:47 p.m. and was conducted in the hotel room. The interview was audio recorded, and a copy of the recording is attached to this report. The following is a synopsis of the interview. For additional information, refer to the audio recording. Frankie said that Shanann wasn't sick while in North Carolina until the day her husband, Chris Watts, arrived. Frankie said that Chris was acting standoffish, but they didn't think much about it. Frankie said that he was pretty close with Shanann, and she would tell him things that she wouldn't tell her parents. Frankie said she never said anything to him about her and Chris not getting along. Frankie said that there were things she would tell her friends that she wouldn't tell him because she didn't want him to worry or tell their parents. Frankie said that on the day that Chris arrived in North Carolina, she was throwing up and had a bad headache. Frankie said Shanann has always had bad headaches. Frankie said he doesn't sleep very well and is often up, so he would check on Shanann. Frankie said that Shanann slept on the couch that night, which he thought was odd. Shanann said that Chris never came out to check on her, which was out of character for him because he was always so caring. Frankie said that Chris was a very good mechanic and helped him fix his brakes. Frankie said that Chris was always a good guy, and he hugged him and thanked him for everything when Chris left North Carolina. Frankie said as soon as he saw the interview Chris did on TV, he knew Chris had done something to Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Celeste. Frankie said that he was planning on coming to Colorado in October for Halloween. Frankie said that one day Shanann was on the phone and the girls were screaming for her, even though they could see her. Frankie said that the girls wanted to be sure their mom was close by them. Frankie said he made a comment to Chris about him being, quote-unquote, chopped liver. Frankie said that he couldn't see Chris hurting Shanann and couldn't imagine what had happened. Frankie said he heard a noise about 2 a.m. on the night Chris arrived in North Carolina and checked on it to find Shanann was sick. Frankie asked her if it was due to the pregnancy, and she said it probably was. Frankie said Shanann had made a post about how she was dehydrated from being in the South, but Frankie said there was no way because she drank a lot of water. Frankie said that Shanann ate lots of vegetables and took care of herself, and that taking care of her unborn baby was her first priority. Frankie said that he heard that Shanann and Chris got into an argument that night, but he didn't hear it. Frankie said he believed it was the night before Shanann, Chris, and the girls left North Carolina. Frankie said that he believed the argument was over Chris's parents. Frankie said he lived in Colorado for about a month and a half when Bella was first born. Frankie said that Bella is quiet and distant, and Celeste is more wild. Frankie said that they learned of Chris's confession on the news. Frankie said that the family received phone calls from the media, and he spoke with one of them for about 30 minutes before realizing who she was. Frankie received a friend request on Facebook from a Chris Watts. I checked the alert and observed the profile picture was a booking photograph of Chris and advised Frankie that it was most likely a fake account created by someone in an attempt to get a reaction out of the family. Frankie said that he feels sorry for Chris and that he loved him like a brother. Frankie said there is no doubt in his mind that Shanann would never hurt her children. Frankie said that Shanann found pistachios in his room and became very upset because Celeste is very allergic to them. He said that she wasn't supposed to be able to have kids because she had lupus, and that the girls were her life. Frankie said that Shanann only slept on the couch in North Carolina one night, and he believed it was the night Chris arrived. Frankie said that the last day they were in North Carolina, they were supposed to meet Chris's family at the beach. He said they went to the beach but didn't meet up with Chris's family due to the earlier fight over the nuts. Frankie said that he kept in contact with Chris's sister, Jamie, even after the big fight. He said he received text messages from her after Chris's interview on the news, and she was defending him. He told her that people were going to talk bad about him and not to let it bother her. Frankie said Chris's dad posted pictures of the girls all the time, and that he liked and commented on all of Shanann's posts of the girls. Frankie said that Chris's family lives in Spring Lake, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes to an hour from Aberdeen, where they live. Frankie said he didn't speak with Shanann as much as he used to, partially because she posted so much on social media. Frankie said he has depression, and he believes he needs medication or to see a doctor. Frankie had no further information. End of report. Attachments, audio recording of interview of Frankie. So that's where we're going to end this part, finishing up page 686. And, my heart goes out to Frank and Frankie and the whole family. I can only imagine what they must have been going through. I mean, this is only 8 days after everything started, and they're, in this hotel room, devastated. And, I can't imagine what it's like having to give interviews with the police and just what they were going through. So, just say an extra prayer for them tonight if you can. We really wish them the best. In loving memory of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, and God, please continue to bless the Rusick family. We pray for them, that they continue to find healing, and that they find peace, as much peace as they can in you. This is The Diplomat. Have a great day.